Great. Well, just to be respectful of everyone's time this afternoon, we will go ahead and get started. I want to thank you for joining us for today's SBDC webinar, Website Tune-Up, 5 Ways to Keep Your Site Running Smoothly with the Pixo team. As you can see, we do have a few presenters today, so Danielle will introduce them here shortly. I just have a few quick housekeeping things before we get started. You are welcome to ask questions throughout the session. We just ask that you submit those via the chat box, and we'll get them covered before we end today's webinar. You'll also receive a follow-up email tomorrow morning, and it will include a recording of the session along with any of the links that are shared throughout the session in the chat box. So at this time, I'll hand it over to Danielle and we'll get started.
Thank you, Jordan. On behalf of Pixo, I'm so honored that we're here today and presenting on our topic of website tune-ups. If you're not already familiar with Pixo, we are a software consultancy in Urbana that creates websites, web apps, mobile apps, and software that put people first. I have a lot of people joining me today, but first I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Jenna Fry, to introduce herself.
Hey everyone, I'm Jenna Fry. I'm the account coordinator at Pixo, and I'm going to be sharing some helpful links and resources in the chat throughout the presentation. So keep an eye out for those. And as Jordan mentioned, she'll be sharing them in that follow-up email as well. So if you happen to miss them in the chat, you'll get them later as well.
Thank you, Jenna. So at Pixo, we advocate for websites that are easy to use, which led us to our topic today, how you can improve your website so it works better for the people who need it, which includes you, surprise. Our 5 consultants will be explaining more about different areas where you can audit your site, what those audits look like, why they're important. So we have Lindsey Markel, Senior Content Strategist, Allie Ofisher, Lead User Experience Designer, Tyler Edwards, Senior Designer, Landi Najarro, Lead Engineer, and Jason Rambeck, who is a Senior Consultant and Lead Web Developer. Each of them will talk about their special area of expertise when it comes to the web and show you how even small changes can make a big impact to your success on your website. And sometimes you just need those little changes or little advice to make, like I said, big impact. So I'm going to turn over to our first speaker, Lindsey Markel.
Hello, thank you, Danielle. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Lindsey Markel. As Danielle mentioned, I'm a content strategist at Pixo. I'm on the user experience and design team. I've been at Pixo about 8 years, and my role is really about helping you figure out who your website is for, or your app, your digital product. But for your website, who is your website for? What do those people need? And how can you structure it and present it in a way that the most people can understand it? So talk about small changes, big impact. Content is kind of, not to boast, but content is kind of the easiest way to tackle that kind of thing, because most people can edit the text or the images, et cetera, on their website. Let's get into it. Next slide, please. Why does reviewing, whoa, we've gone, yeah. Why does reviewing, thank you, Danielle. You're fine, you're doing great. Why does reviewing and updating your content even matter? Why is it important? Number one, because your content is not for you. You don't spend time, money, effort, thought on building a website for you to look at the website and say, I love my website. And I always say, if you do, then great, I'm really happy for you. That's a really cool situation. But for the most part, you have a website because you're trying to reach other people. You're trying to reach customers, students, whoever your audience is. And so you need to regularly review and update that content to make sure it's speaking to those audiences. Reviewing and updating your content makes sure that your information on your site is equitable, basically meaning that people can understand it. It's good to review it every once in a while and make sure it's written as simply as it can be, that it's structured in a way that makes sense to people. Reviewing and updating your content regularly clarifies the ownership. Who is in charge of this page? Very, very common for that not to be actually defined. And so looking at that content and making sure you know who owns every page helps. And reviewing your content regularly makes sure that your site supports your goals. I talk a lot about the audience stuff, and that's a high priority for a site, but it also should be supporting whatever you want to be getting out of your website. So reviewing and updating your content on a regular basis helps achieve these goals and more. Next slide, please. If you don't, here are some things that can happen. We see these all the time. I just said to someone earlier today, the content issues that we see on websites are never unique. It can become a filing cabinet or a scrapbook. It just holds everything that has ever been published without any regard to whether it's useful. You can lose sight of those audience priorities. They become an afterthought, which is bad. Things can get out of date very quickly, especially things like dates, names, contact information, links. The dreaded abandoned news page, events calendar, blog. Someone had great intentions once upon a time and you posted one thing in 2018 and now it's just sitting there fallow. So sad. We hate to see that, and it makes your organization look out of date as well. Lower readability. I mentioned we want equitable information, make sure that people can understand. Lower readability of content, higher bar of understanding. That's bad. Missed opportunities to connect with your people. And ultimately, it just reflects negatively on your organization when your website is not reviewed regularly. So how can you avoid that? What you can do is, big reveal, make a list of all the pages on your site. Depending on the size of your site, this might be really scary. So if you have a big site, you can prioritize. You can prioritize by using analytics. If you have Google Analytics or any kind of analytics software installed, what pages are the most popular? What pages are people going to? Or pick a high priority section of the site. If you're a product company and you're trying to sell products, focus on those product pages and don't worry about your about page as much. Think about the audiences that you're trying to reach and what they're interested in first and foremost. Make a list of those pages on your site. And then you can, next slide, please. And then once you have a list of the pages on your site, you can review that content page by page. So here's sort of a general rubric that you can review that content for. What are you looking for? You're looking for readability. You want to lower the bar for understanding. This doesn't mean, there's a writer named Sarah Winters who wrote a great book called Content Design, and a quote I love from it is, it's not dumbing down, it's opening up. Sometimes people get very offended when you say, oh, you should lower the bar for understanding because their content is highfalutin and it's very complicated and whatever. That's fine. You don't have to dilute the meaning of it, but you should lower the bar for understanding as much as you can. A tool I really love is called Hemingway. It's free, hemingwayapp.com. Thank you, Jenna. 8th grade readability is kind of the gold standard for best practices on the web. Hemingway is just a free tool. It's kind of like a word processor. Well, if you know what a word processor is, it's just a text editor. You can type in it, you can paste your writing into it, and it will give you a grade level and highlight some ways that you can make your writing even more readable. I also want to say I've been using ChatGPT for this a little bit. I think the last time we did this webinar, someone asked me a ChatGPT question and I was like, I have no idea what to say about this, but I have been using it to grade the readability of writing and to make suggestions as to how to simplify the readability. That's all I can say about it at this time. Thank you. Also review your content for calls to action. Calls to action just meaning buttons, links that take your audience to a next step. Are the next steps clear on this page? What does your audience want or need to do on this page? Put yourself in their shoes. And then also, what do you need or want them to do from this page? What helps your organization or your company? Next, relevance. Why is this important at all? That's a question that most people honestly don't ask about their websites. What purpose does this page serve for the reader? And what goal does this support for the organization? It really needs to do at least one of those two things. Ideally, it does both. If it doesn't do either of those things, you can probably get rid of it. And redundancy. Redundancy basically meaning, is this page even necessary? Do we have another page like this on our site? Is this information unique? Could we combine two pages to make one? So can we combine them or delete them or archive them? We love that. Do a little cleaning of the house. Don't be afraid to archive and delete your pages. So that's a really quick flyover of what we call a content audit. The process can be very big. It can be very small. So think about priority of pages. What is most important for you to review? We love to do this. We do this, of course. We can always help with, if you don't know who your audience is, you're like, well, I'm trying to answer the question of, does this serve a purpose for my audience? But I don't know who I'm thinking about. We can help you figure that out, help you figure out what the audience needs. We can make, if you have a huge site especially, it's like overwhelming to think about doing this. We do the content inventory, the list of pages, and the audit guidance. We can help you. We can do sort of a general review of your site, a flyover based on just best practices without knowing too much about your organization, just give you best practice advice on readability. And also process and maintenance review. If you're like, I don't know how things get published on our site, we need to revamp our process of how this all works, we can help you out. Thank you very much. That's me. I don't know if I'm supposed to introduce Allie, but I will. Introducing my friend and yours, Allison Ofisher.
Thank you, Lindsay. So I am as Danielle mentioned, a lead UX designer at Pixo, and one of my jobs as a UX designer is to help organizations achieve a good user experience when it comes to navigating their websites. And so creating a good user experience, though, requires really a lot of intentional effort, a lot of shared understanding, and a willingness to empathize and acknowledge that how you all see the world isn't the same as others do. And often that's your audiences. You're not viewing it the same way that they are, or using it or trying to find information in the same way. So navigation is really the primary way you find what you're looking for on websites. I like to think of these as there's two primary ways you can do this. That's through either primary navigation, that's usually at the top of a lot of websites. And then there's also contextual navigation, and those are often found like different links in a page that are bringing you to related content. So both are vital and used to find information or complete workflows within a website. So think of these as your doors and windows to different rooms, and without them, you'd be stuck in one room of a house and not be able to escape. So you might be asking though, well, why are websites so difficult to navigate in the first place, right? I mean, houses are easy to navigate. Why are websites so hard? And I want you to think about, first, think about keys to your house, say. How would you explain to someone where they are at this moment? You know, maybe you'd say like, oh, they're hanging on a hook next to the door, or they're in my bag, under my desk, to the right of this thing, right of the trash can, or something like that. Now I want you to think of, where is your most recent copy of your resume in the cloud? And how would you tell someone to find that? The difference here is that one is in this made up world and the other's in a physical world. Usually physical worlds are a lot more easy to describe and explain where something is at. So if you're telling someone though that's not familiar with how you personally have set up your cloud and folders and where that lives, unless it's really, really clear, it's like the first thing, that's all you have in your cloud, it can be really hard to find. And that's oftentimes what we see with digital products like websites or apps. And digital interfaces are notoriously the Wild West. Anyone can put anything anywhere. I wouldn't put a door on my roof, but you can do that on websites. And this is what makes them really unintuitive and difficult to navigate, unlike the physical world. So because of our unique mental models and positions in different domains, how you experience or interpret an interface is likely not the same as someone else. And that's what you have to remember when you're looking to improve your own website's navigation. So let me give you some tips here. So how can you assess your website's navigation today? First question I always ask organizations is, when is the last time you've observed someone interacting with your own website? Before investing in any changes or improvements, you need to really identify where those problems are happening. And you do that by observing someone using your site. If you don't do this, you could be investing effort into the wrong spots. And we've seen that happen a lot. That is, it's a lot of times assumptions are made, and also effort is put in the wrong spots. So really making it more challenging and maybe not solving the actual problem that your users are having. So to start, I recommend making a list of things people could be looking for or trying to do on your website. These could be pages that are often referenced or links that people might be looking for. And you can do this right now. Just jot down 5, 10 things. If it's a large website, you might have a really long list, but try to get to like, what do you think people are coming to your website for? Then play a little bit of a detective and try to find that information yourself. I call this an assumption list. So I would do things like try using your search bar to navigate the site only. Maybe try using just that primary navigation at the top of the page. Think about what terms you look for. Are they even represented there? Ask yourself those questions internally first. Then imagine what other information is related to that information on one page. Can you get to it without using the primary navigation? This is where you're testing that contextual nav. And really what you want to do here is note barriers. So mark where you're assuming there are frustration points or assuming someone might get caught up because, oh, that's a term that doesn't sound like I've heard anyone really use, our customers use at all. That might be inside lingo, or, oh, I don't see that link there. That could be a problem. That's not taking them to the form they need to get to. So just note those assumptions, and then and those are really become your list to test and list to see if that's actually happening with your users. So next thing you do is you're observing real people using your website. We call this usability testing, and it's a service that we offer to help organizations really better understand how people are finding information or completing tasks on their website. But you yourself can do this. A quick version is asking someone, ideally it's someone who's at least fits the model of an audience member for your organization, and ask them to try to complete a single task using your website. This is not asking them what they think or if they like it, or asking them if they think a solution will solve their problem. I want to be clear about that. All right. So this is really, you're just sitting back, asking them a question. Say, hey, where would you go to find that? So say it's like a weather website. Where would you go to find today the forecast for the next 5 days? And just watch and see where they go. What's their first instinct? The most important thing is asking them to talk out loud about what they're seeing, what they're looking for. Those are going to be your clues. And then you can go back to this assumption list and check off, yes, I was right with that. Oh no, that was actually a problem. Oh, that's fine. And this really helps you get to that, start to understand where the real problems your users are having on your site and if they can complete tasks. Another way to better understand the usability of your site is through a UX audit. So this is something that I do to evaluate, in general, how usable an interface is. So essentially, it's a way to get a holistic sense of where your website is falling short, and also provide guidance on what areas of your website you should conduct usability tests on, because that's, again, getting that real feedback from your audience members. That's going to be the most important part of all this. This will just help you kind of decide maybe where to put some of that effort. Another way I want to talk through is just testing your site's website navigation through a card sorting activity. So this really helps you better understand which terms resonate with your audience members. Again, if I'm looking at the top of a navigation and I'm looking for the word forecast, but you have it on there as, I don't know, like 10-day plan or something, I might not find that what I need. So what this is pretty much you give participants a set of cards with terms on them, and you ask them to sort them into groups of like things. There are many different ways you can do this. Actually, you could do an open card sort or closed there, but really it's just for right now to know it's a way to find the right terminology that matches what your audiences would use naturally. The last one I want to touch on is creating a navigation flow. And this is really to audit any and identify any broken relationships in your navigation. I put an example of this. These look like great high-level blueprints. And the important part of this is seeing the lines that connect pages outside of that top navigation, that contextual navigation. Doing an audit like this could highlight areas where you do need those relationships and they aren't currently on your website. And that's something that then you could take to a development team and have figure out how to make those connections work. All right, I'm going to hand it off to Tyler Edwards.
Hello, that is my name. Thank you, Allie. Yes, I'm Tyler. I'm the senior designer at Pixo. I'm a visual designer, graphic designer, whatever you prefer. It's my role to make things look the way that they look. So for this tune-up, I'm here to ask the question, is your website's visual design serving to guide your users, or is it getting in the way? Is it aiding or is it hindering their experience? And so, when we start to consider how smooth a user's interaction will be with your website, everything that we're talking about today, visual design is not often the first thing we consider, right? I mean, content makes sense, user experience makes even more sense, performance, accessibility, things we're going to talk about, those facets, they usually sit at the top of the audit list. But the fact is, design plays a critical role when it comes to ensuring a smooth experience for your site visitors. So I'd say effective visual design enables users to willingly and effortlessly engage with your content. Design is the very first thing that your users will process and form opinions on well before they read any of your text. And I'm not talking about whether your website looks good or bad. The successful design must first elevate your message and invite visitors to seamlessly interact with it. So pleasing aesthetics should serve that purpose first. Your site, you might be thinking about your site right now, thinking about how the design looks. It may seem visually stunning on the surface, but if your styles are inconsistent, or the hierarchy is confusing, or it's impossible to read, then your design will only serve to hinder your site visitors. But if the design works to produce a delightful and painless experience for your users when they're engaging with your content, then folks will read what they need to read, and they'll get where they need to go. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, okay, well, how can I know if my design is serving that purpose? And I'm so glad you asked that question. Thank you for thinking it. I could feel your questions coming my way. Thankfully, it's not too hard. And you don't even need to be a designer to find the issues on your own website. So I've got 3 questions that you can use to better discern whether your web design is helping or hindering the user's experience. So first, is your design visually consistent? Is there a unified system of styles that ties everything together? And do those styles clearly communicate the nature and function of each element? Now, your website, and you're thinking about it right now, it may already have a pretty unified set of colors and typography that's based on your brand and your identity, right? That's great. However, certain elements and components can easily become visually disorganized as we add new content to the site. So buttons give us a really great example of this. We got these buttons right here. Your website may have started out with a set amount of button styles like these, right? You have maybe you have a special hero button, your primary, your secondary, etc. Each of those button styles were designed to communicate something specific about the kind of action attached to them, right? However, over time, if you go to the next slide here, you may introduce new components that you want to stand out from the rest, or a new page that represents someone else's brand, or maybe you just hire some rogue designer who wants to shake things up a bit. And as those things happen, new button styles like these get created and added to the system. And this can be really confusing to your user because different styles communicate different things. Where a red button once meant danger for some reason, there's now a perfectly harmless hero CTA using the same danger color, right? That change requires your user to stop and process what they're seeing every time they interact with it. And that will inevitably erode their trust with your UI. This is equally true for components and navigation, page composition, every aspect, every visual aspect. The more variety there is, the less understandable it will be. So be on the lookout for those stylistic outliers and excessive elements. All right, here's our second question. Is the hierarchy clear? This is really important. Does your website's design help the user focus on the right things in the right order? So thoughtful visual hierarchy will do that. And here's what I mean by that, this visual hierarchy. So maybe you've seen this before, but when we look at this image, our eyes naturally follow the pattern that the text expects us to, right? We read the big middle line first, then the 2 bottom lines, and then we bounce back up to the top to read that small line. The designer accomplishes this with the right combination of size, color, space, and composition, right? There's kind of a science to this. You balance these things rightly with the right visuals, and you're going to lead your eyes up and down the screen in the way that you need to. Now, here's an example of how the lack of hierarchy becomes a hindrance to our users. Let's talk about this for a second. You see this design here. I'm not quite sure even what kind of website this is for. I found this online. I just thought it was a great example of this. You can see here that there's very little size difference in the text that we're seeing across the design. You know, there's some at the top that looks larger. It draws our attention up there first, but then all of the other content is really kind of equal in its size. There's a very monochromatic color scheme everywhere, and monochromatic schemes are fine, but when there's kind of this wash of green everywhere, you don't really quite know where to look first. Not every bit of content needs to be visually above the fold. I know maybe some of you are familiar with that term, the fold, that very first thing you see when you come to the site. And this is one of those cases where lots of things get shoved up there. And so your eyes are trying to scan across all kinds of content that you can't quite process in the right way. And there's very little white space. There's an overwhelming amount of information here. The majority of this white space is around this very large logo in the middle. That means I don't know what, but maybe that's the most important thing. This page tells me that's the most important thing. Also, that phone number at the top grabs my attention too. I might give it a call. We'll see. Now, let's look at a better example here. Here's an example of thoughtful visual hierarchy. So with this design here, we see this big text, this button, and this image right in a row here. So we see linear is a better way to build products. And then we go right down to this next subtext here, led down to the button right after that. We see the image beneath it. And then we kind of pop right back up and we see another label just above that gives us a little information. Not that important compared to the rest of it, but our eyes have been drawn to the right things in the right order. So thoughtful hierarchy should also leverage the way that site visitors naturally read text, especially when there's a lot of it. So as our eyes move down a page, people tend to digest content in an F or a Z pattern. So here's what I mean by that. Thanks for changing that slide here. We either read from left to right, as you would, a newspaper, or we scan the page in a zigzag fashion, as you see on the bottom there. When we compose our content in a way that follows these patterns, then we can ensure that our users won't miss what's important. So hierarchy is key. Be on the lookout for that. Okay, third question. Here we go. Is the text readable? Pretty simple, straightforward, important question to ask because we can miss this one a lot. Now, Lindsey just talked about the readability of our text in regards to the words themselves. She was talking about the use of Hemingway and the way that we compose our content. We should also make sure that our text is visually readable. Is your design making your content illegible? So in this case, is the font too small or is it really wacky, hard to read? We'll do another slide here. Are the images or graphics behind it that cause the text to blend in? This isn't on the web, but I'm sure we've seen this before on the web where we put this nice big image behind a bunch of text that is the wrong color on top of it and you can barely read it. Are the lines of your text far too long? This can be an issue on larger screens, right? When lines of text stretch out over a longer horizontal distance, your eyes are more likely to kind of lose track of where they are as they run down the page. And this is a big one. We're going to talk about this one. Is there enough contrast between the background color and the font color? This one's huge and by far the most common issue. And so in this image here, we've got a great example. Now, when I look at this, this is a decent web page, right? It looks nice, really nice colors, good hierarchy, clear call to action. But that white text on top of a turquoise background makes it very difficult to read. The lack of contrast causes the text to nearly disappear. And not only is it annoying, but it's a major accessibility violation, something that Landi's actually going to talk about here in a moment. So a simple tool that I would, a simple tool to help you determine appropriate text and background contrast is something called Colorable. Very easy to use. Jenna's going to share a link to this in the chat. Thank you, Jenna. So you just drop in the color of your text and the color of your background, and Colorable will give you its rating according to the Web Content Accessibility Guideline scale. So accessible text contrast should score no less than 4.51. And so we have an example of this in the next slide here. So you can see we've changed these colors, and now these colors that we see on the right here not only are meeting the right accessibility guidelines, but they're far easier to read, and they'll make the design all that much better. So let's recap. Let's jump down to the next slide. 3 questions to ask of your design to make sure that it's helping, not hindering your users from engaging with your content. Is your design visually consistent? Is the hierarchy clear? And is the text readable? And this is something we can help with. At Pixo, we like to do a design audit, and where we comb through your website and we look for all of these particular things, including a list of other things. We've got a design audit checklist that we not only check off these particular things to see if there's any issues, but also we look at responsiveness and graphic weight. Are we using images that are too big, or any kind of thing that's going to slow down your site? We look at interactivity when it comes to hover states and other aspects of the site to make sure you're interacting well, and so much more. And so when we work on that together, we then give clear guidelines on how to fix those issues, how to improve your site, how to move forward. So thank you for listening to my portion here. We're now going to pass it on to the Landi of all Landis, Landi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Landi Najarro, and I will apologize in advance if you hear my lap crying. It's an infant. So we'll see how it goes. I want to talk about accessibility today. And the question that I'm asking is your site optimized for people with disabilities and assistive technologies? So first of all, what is web accessibility? You heard Tyler talk a little bit about color contrast. You heard both Tyler and Lindsey talk about readability. And web accessibility is the art of providing equal access to users with all different types of abilities, and just creating equal opportunity for web content for all of your users. So when we talk about a disability, there are about 1 billion people that have disabilities on our planet. And the goal of an accessibility audit is to find and fix issues that create barriers between your users with disabilities and your website. So that graphic on the right is just a small subset of some disabilities that might exist, but it is hardly scratching the surface. There are many other types of disabilities as well. So you won't be able to make sure that your site works for every single disability in every single scenario, but what the goal is to make an equitable experience for all users regardless of their disabilities. So we have a lot of tools that we use that aim to address those needs of the different individuals. All right, so accessibility is for everyone. It's important because anybody can become a part of the people with disabilities community at any time. Some are temporary, some are permanent. So for example, you break your arm, your mouse is broken, you're a new parent, and some are permanent, like you only have 1 arm. And we want to make sites accessible because it improves the user experience for users with disabilities and users without disabilities on your site. So that really does, when you improve it for the marginalized groups, it improves it for everybody. And these graphics, I just want to explain what these are. They're different assistive technologies. So the one on the left is a high color contrast keyboard, which just makes it easier for that person to find the keys that they're looking for. The middle image is a sip and puff device. So a user will take in sips of air and puff out puffs of air to navigate through a website. And the last one is a regular keyboard with a braille line underneath so that they can type the way that you would normally type and then read the content on your website with the braille underneath. So yeah, there are repercussions for if you don't make your site accessible. So 1, people with disabilities in your target audience may be unable to interact with the elements on your website, or they may miss important information. Another possible issue could be you could miss opportunities to connect with a large number of people, which can be really important. If people are unable to use your website or use your system, they will look elsewhere. So an example of this can be applying for a university. If your form, your application form is really difficult for a user with disabilities to use, then they might go to a university that's easier for them, that's more accommodating to them to get their needs met. And then the last thing are legal ramifications. So if you work in an industry that must comply with Section 508 accessibility requirements, that could be like higher ed or the government, then you need to make sure that your site is accessible. Okay, so well, what can you do? There are 4 main areas of accessibility: perceivability, operability, understandability, and robustness. So what you can do is consider putting yourself in the shoes of persons with various disabilities and making small changes to your site that would help accommodate those users. So for example, we have motor disabilities. Imagine that you can only use your voice to control the computer. Imagine that you can move your arms pretty well, but not your fingers, or you use another adaptive device like a sip and puff device. Imagine that you have no control of your arms and you have to use another device like a sip and puff device. Then there's cognitive disabilities. Imagine that you have trouble with memorization, calculations, solving puzzles. And then the last type of disability that we're going to kind of go over is visual disabilities. So imagine that you can't tell certain colors apart. There's no green and red, there's just different shades of gray. Imagine you can read, but only at 400% magnification. And imagine that you can't read or can't read comfortably and you use a screen reader instead to get that content. Does your site accommodate these? So you can test early and often by putting yourself in these people's shoes while you're building out your website. So what can you do about it? Well, for motor disabilities, you can do keyboard only because most assistive technology appears to your computer as a keyboard input-output. So if you can access every element on your website via keyboard, then many other types of assistive technology can also access it. Also, you can do mobile devices first. So sometimes elements on mobile are too small that even users without disabilities can't interact with them properly. So if you ever get like a pop-up ad and you have to hit the little X to close it, sometimes that's really difficult for users with, standard abilities. And that can be very difficult. So you want to make sure that you have a good enough touch area on your website for buttons when they're in mobile view. For cognitive disabilities, you can use a readability analyzer. So the one that I use is called Readability Analyzer because engineers are not very creative like that. But I would suggest using Hemingway like Lindsey shared earlier because she's the content strategist. So her tool is going to be superior to my tool. And I'm going to talk about the differences in tooling a little bit later as well. You can also make sure that you don't have auto advancing carousels. So if you do have content on your site that moves, you need to make sure that there's a way to play and pause it. You need to make sure that you allow 3 seconds per word on the screen before the content changes. And that sounds like a lot, but it is a lot. You need time for people with various levels of ability to get through that content and read it before it goes to the next thing. And then there's visual disabilities. So you can use a color contrast checker like Colorable that Tyler just mentioned before. You can use a colorblind checker. So the graphic that I shared basically allows you to see what users with different color blindnesses would see when engaging with your site. So you can choose between the different types of color blindness, and that's pretty cool. Or you could use a screen reader. A screen reader will basically allow you to hear what a blind user would hear when interacting with your site. And they only hear one element of your website at a time. So it's really important to get the context around what you're doing correct with hidden accessibility features. And you'll hear that a lot, ARIA labels, why ARIA. These are things that we do as engineers in the background to make sure that assistive technology is getting all the context around the element that you're interacting with so it knows how to properly do that. The screen reader that we use a lot at Pixo is VoiceOver, but there are a lot of different screen readers that are operating system specific and some that are like general browser ones like Chromebox. As long as you have Chrome, you can use Chromebox. Yeah, but not all tools are made the same. So we move forward. We have advanced testing. So this little graphic or this little video that's going to play is for a visualization tool. It's not an evaluation tool, but it's a bookmarklet.
And a bookmarklet is a little snippet of JavaScript code that you can drag up to your bookmarks bar or your favorites bar, and then run it on any browser. And so this one allows you to, based on the different categories for WCAG, click on one, so like a heading or landmarks, and it will put a little box, a colored box around those elements that you selected. And then the upper corner, right corner with the label will give you some accessibility information about, well, what does it say now? What could I expect out of this? What is the accessible name for this element? What lists exist on my site? So things that you wouldn't see without inspecting the code. This is a way to just visualize that and make it easier for engineers and the rest of the team to talk about the needs of a site. So as I mentioned before, not all testing tools are created equal. All of these tools are some human's implementation of the guidelines, and it's really influenced by how they've understood the guidelines, and they're ever changing, and not everybody's going to interpret them the same way. And so not all tools will find the same bugs, but the goal is just to make sure that your site is as accessible as possible to create an equitable experience for all users, regardless of their abilities. Pixo has a team who understands Section 508 compliance, the ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the WCAG standards, and we can help identify and improve accessibility issues. We've been working in the accessibility space for over 10 years. I'm coming up on my 10 years at Pixo here. And it's really cool because we developed this tool, the accessibility bookmarklets, with DRES, which is the Disability Resources and Educational Services at U of I. So yeah, we're constantly adapting and partnering with people to find out how to let everybody make their sites better. This is a free tool that we offer so that you can get into this space and make sure that you're, doing what's best for your users. But if you need additional information, like I'm not even sure where to start in the first place. I don't know how to even test to see how accessible my site is. Or if you need help, you've got the testing down, but you don't know how to bring your site to compliance. We have a lot of different types of support. So we can do audits. We can do recommendation for fixes once you've had an audit or if you've done your own audit. We could do quotes for the actual fixes depending on your tech stack. We do a lot of different types of projects here at Pixo. So you might be able to engage with us for actually implementing those fixes, and a list of testing tools, which Jenna will be sharing with you. So we've got tons of tools used in tons of different ways. And this is my jam. This is the stuff that excites me. So, if anybody has any further questions, I'd be happy to talk about them. But for now, I'm going to kick it over to Jason Rambeck.
Thank you, Landi. Yes, my name is Jason Rambeck. I'm a web engineer here at Pixo. So I, among other things, write code and work on designing backends of things. And I'm going to be talking about the last area of user experience that's important to audit, and that's performance. So as an engineer, I work on the nuts and bolts of a website. So I often deal with making sure a website performs well. And performance is one of those things that's easy to overlook. It can be often an afterthought, even during the design process, and especially after a website has been up for a while. Now, not only is performance a part of user experience, it's the first thing that people are going to notice, especially if they don't see anything pretty quick. And in that case, and unfortunately, like other areas of user experience, it's one of those things that people don't point out unless it's bad. People that have a good user experience, they go and they can find the stuff that they're looking for. That's what they expect. And they actually do have good feelings about that, but people will complain, if they can't do that, and especially if it is rather frustrating. Here's a study. There's a study that asked people to rank 5 areas of user experience on the web. And as you can see, performance, or the speed it takes here to load a page, was the highest ranked as the most important to people. That's even above how easy it is to find what you're looking for, or how well something fits on your screen, how simple the site is to use, or how attractive it is. And so if you have if you have content and it's easy to find, but people can't get to it in a quick enough manner, then they're going to start getting frustrated. Another study here that we can look at here, or some numbers from a study, is this data point or several data points on the likelihood that people will bounce, which just means to when they leave a page after waiting a certain amount of time. So here you have some numbers between 1 and 3 seconds. There's a 30% increase that people will leave. 30%, that's kind of negligible. 1 to 5 seconds, so just 2 more seconds, and that triples. And then after that, 6 seconds, every second after that, we're adding another 10 or 20%. So this is how people are. We're impatient people. We live in a just now kind of information age where people expect to get the information quickly, and especially if they can find it somewhere else that is quick, that's something that we don't want people to leave our site to do something when all we have to do is give them what they want in a timely fashion. This next point here is fast websites, they build trust. And I think it's important to note that user experience in general builds trust with our users. And when a user is feeling frustrated using your website, that frustration is not just with the website, it's towards you or your organization. So all of these areas of user experience that we're talking about do have an impact on not just the individual users and what they're trying to do, but also their general feelings towards you. 3.7 seconds. And this is a great number to think about. It's proverbial cliff of frustration. As a visitor waits past 3.7 seconds, their frustration really starts to build. And the vast majority of websites take longer than this, so don't worry if yours does too, but it is a good number to keep in mind. So I think users, if they can get to a website or load a page or do what they need to do in under this time, then they usually don't think about it. It feels natural. So there are great tools for measuring the speed and performance of your site. PageSpeed's Insights, which is a Google tool, is hands down the best and easiest, especially for a layperson to get a sense of how their website measures, but we even use it as developers too, to get some real detailed information about measuring, what kind of things need to be updated to have a website perform better. So if you've never used this tool before, you can do it today. It just takes a minute to get an idea of where your website stands from a performance perspective. And I'm going to go ahead and show on the next slide here what kind of this tool does. It gives you just kind of a nice overview. And this is just part of the report. The rest of the report, which I won't show, has a lot of just details, some of them technical, some not so technical, about the performance of your website. But one of the really nice things is it gives you a score. So this is Google Ventures website. So I chose a site that I thought wouldn't perform that well, so we can get some interesting numbers. And Google Ventures, they have a specific kind of audience that isn't general. So and they have sort of lots of graphics. So I figured it might score a little lower. And certainly enough, 38 is on in the red. It's on the low side of performance. So PageSpeed Insights gives you a green and a yellow and a red. And if you're in the green, you're doing pretty good. And if you're in the red, you got some work to do. If you're in the middle there, you can decide how much effort you want to do to get up higher. But some of the other big numbers here that's important, that can help you understand kind of where these scores are coming from, is these other metrics. So the one here in 6 seconds is called first contentful pain. And that's just how long it takes for anything sort of to appear. Anything sort of meaningful to appear on the page as people are waiting. And then the 2 below that, 8.4 seconds, is largest contentful pain, is kind of when is most content available. And these are just scientific kind of measurements that people actually psychologically process in their brain. And then this other one here in the top right, 8.4 seconds, is time to interactive. And that's how much time it takes for some action to be taken on your page. The page is loaded far enough so that somebody could maybe fill out a form or click a button or execute a search or something like that. And that can be important too if that's what they came to your page to do. So the next slide here too is just sort of a follow-up of how this report works. This report is really great because it gives you a list of opportunities or things you can do to make your site perform better. Some of these suggestions can range from easy do-it-yourself tasks like resizing an image on a page or advanced server techniques. Finally, performance enhancements are never really done. If your website is being updated on a regular basis, you should check performance on a regular basis. So go out, take that first step and measure your website's performance and see how it fares and take it from there. Thank you, Danielle.
Oh, Danielle, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I totally did. I could not see the screen in the chat going on. So I'm just going to stop sharing and see if Jenna, maybe you caught anything that we needed to address before we take questions.
I haven't seen any questions come through. So if anybody has any that they submitted to Jordan, I maybe missed those, but otherwise, yeah, we're open for questions. There's one. I can read this one out loud. Is there a good solution to the problem of disappearing links? I write blogs on my website with links to other websites and have struggled with verifying the integrity of those links over time. Also, would links to external websites slow down the loading of my website? Anybody have a response?
I can speak to part of that. We do periodically run a broken link checker, and they have free broken link checkers out there and paid ones. We also have it tied into our continuous integration. So there are ones that run as a command line scripts where you provided a URL, you say how many levels deep you want it to check. You can decide if you want it to find each distinct instance of a broken link, or just in general, maybe you have one link on your site 12 times and you just want to know which one is that broken link. So we do broken link checkers a lot. And then as for going off site, if it's going off site to fetch something to build your site, like Google Fonts or a style somewhere, then that will add time to your site loading. But if it's like just a link offsite, then that's not even counted as part of your page speed. Once you click and you're going offsite, that's completely different. Does anybody else have anything to add?
Dr. Bosel, thank you for your question. Dr. Bosel is a regular of ours, so we enjoy seeing him on these.
Well, we were happy to answer more questions. I know Jordan's going to follow up with some of the helpful links today, but if there are questions, we are more than happy to take some time aside and answer them. We have a lot of information we shared with you today, so you're probably digesting all of that, but we'd love to have conversations around things like this. As you can see, the people that spoke today, they're so much fun to work with, and I'm sure a conversation with them anytime would be appreciated.
Oh, we did get another one. It says, what's the biggest design pet peeve you see when auditing websites?
Thank you, Trevor. That's a fun one. I will answer that. Oh boy, biggest pet peeve. I mean, you know, it's hard to make it an actual pet peeve, because there's a lot of people who, you know, when they put together a website, they get excited about what they can do within their capacity, and it's certainly like a good step forward, and so it's certainly not anything to be frustrated about. But I think the biggest thing is just that visual clutter that builds up over time. You know, when you have a website and people keep adding new different things to the homepage, you know, they want to get a new banner at the top because they have some new product that they want to put out, or they've got, you know, summer courses are happening or something of that matter. There's always like new things being added, new pages being added. And when that happens, you have different people doing it over time, because maybe the original designer or the original team wasn't on it. And so you just start to get all these kind of things that like look kind of like what it was, but is no longer it, or maybe it had to get done really fast. And so, you know, it was, some corners were cut and you can tell the difference between them. And so when things just get lose that unity, it can be a hard mess to pick through, but it's also so satisfying to just like wipe the table clean and you know, make something a lot more simple and unified. Great question, Trevor. I appreciate it, buddy.
There was another question that popped through there. Do you do e-commerce type site? like Danielle putting
I was
this in the chat.
just-
I don't know if you want to speak to it. though.
Yeah, I was just responding to Otis, but typically we don't work with e-commerce, but we might be able to offer some guidance or suggestions. So if people are looking for specific e-commerce help, the question itself, maybe we can help, but we might recommend you to a different firm that would be more helpful.
Awesome. And Jason did put the link, and I'll reshare just since it got pushed up, for Dr. Bosale to kind of reiterate the link or the broken link question. And then one more question we got says, what type of clients do you serve?
Thanks, Mariah, for asking that. We typically work a lot in the higher education space. So being here in the Champaign-Urbana area, University of Illinois, but other higher education organizations as well. But we also work in the agriculture space and manufacturing. And when it comes to websites specifically, if you have a lot of content, we could probably help you figure that out.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. And I will reiterate for anyone who jumped on maybe a few minutes late, you will receive the recording of today's session. So like Danielle said, lots of information. So if you're just kind of absorbing all of it right now and then some questions come up, please don't hesitate to reach out and I can connect you with the Pixo team, or you can connect with them directly if you'd like. But I'll make sure that I include all of that information in the follow-up email for you. All righty. Well, thank you so much to all of you who joined us and the Pixo team that was on today's presentation. Lots of great info for everyone. So we do have some other sessions scheduled with the Pixo team, so feel free to register for those. They're all listed on our SBDC site. Oh, I apologize. We got one more question, which seems like we can probably, oh, Danielle, thank you. You're so quick. We do work with nonprofits for anyone who is curious what that question was, but so
Yes,
we will go
absolutely.
ahead. We will go ahead and wrap up. Thank you everyone for joining us and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.